James Robinson leads his backfield in snaps once again and puts together another solid performance. So, what does that mean for his dynasty value going forward? That and more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co host, Chris Allen. Chris, it looks like James Robinson's breaking the Achilles narrative. What do you think about his value going forward?
I mean, his value is tied to what the coaching staff believes in him. And if you had, checked his dynasty stock about this same time last year, it was with a horrific coaching staff that, I mean, Urban Meyer almost like said like point blank that he didn't even want him on the team. He was too slow, right?
Yeah.
I mean, coming out of college, I mean, UDFA, what did he run, like 4.5, 4.6?
Yeah, he wasn't a quick guy. And then,
Wasn't a quick guy, and it
Ettiene.
was and like that's really like we remember all the superlatives that we heard about Ettiene like coming out. What was it, slasher, right? Like that's how they characterized him. And of course, with a guy like Urban Meyer, who's primarily his like coaching acumen like comes from the college game, where it's just like speed kills. You have all these quick guys. I mean, look at all the wide receivers that Ohio State has pumped out over the past like 5 or 6 years. So it makes some sense. I'm not saying that Urban Meyer, in like the tragedy that was his coaching tenure, like in Jacksonville, was right or not, but it would kind of make sense that he would gravitate to a guy like Travis Etienne, where it's like if you see the speed, you see the power, and of course there were some concerns about him as a pass catcher, as a receiver. But you can mold, you can teach some of that. Like you can turn him into something that would be useful. And so he sees that, he gets enamored with it, and of course they draft him, like with the draft capital that they used. Okay, fine. But I mean, the biggest thing that a coaching staff like has to be able to do, and this is one of Meyer's like biggest downfalls, is being able to adapt to the personnel that you have. So what if you have a running back that runs like a 4.5 or 4.6? If he's successful on the runs that he has, he's efficient with the runs that he has, also able to create explosives in an offense that, for the most part, I mean, outside of some flashes from Trevor Lawrence, I mean, the passing game was completely inept. You have to use that. There's no excuse for you not to be able to mount like some semblance of an offense around the things that do work, right? Because if you can't even build around the concepts or the things that are working for your offense, like then what are you doing as an NFL coach? And look at what Dan Campbell was capable of doing with the Lions like just last season. Like the passing game wasn't working because they had a number of offensive linemen that were either injured, out, or struggling to come into their own like as players. So what did he do? Like he was leaning on the players that he had, leaning on the talent he had. Of course, I mean, if you've got DeAndre Swift for the games that they had him, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown like coming on as a rookie, and of course TJ Hawkinson like here and there. I mean, the talent gap, it's a chasm between what Detroit has and what Jacksonville had like last season. But still, it's on you as the coach in order to be able to use what we got. And now we see that. And with James Robinson, it's almost a complete night and day approach to how they're using both James Robinson and Travis Etienne, where here now you see Doug Peterson. They love James Robinson, not just as a running back, but also just like the pass protection.
That's
too.
The problem.
Yeah. It's like they love him, but I think now we're seeing like defined roles like for both of them. Like Travis Etienne could grow into a full 3-down role. And I think that's fine. I think that's possible for him.
Maybe.
At some point, I think it's possible. But I think as of right now, James Robinson has clearly shown that he is the better rusher of the two. He's clearly shown he is the better pass protector of the two. And Travis Etienne, I thought, played well as a pass protector, like in week 3 against the Chargers, like Bosa and the Bosettes, even though like Bosa is out for the next like few weeks, at least with a groin strain. But I think like these are things that Doug Peterson almost immediately came in and saw that this was apparent, that there was a gap between Robinson and Ettiene. But still he's adapting to that personnel. And so I think that we also as dynasty managers have to do the same. Like the Achilles narrative for James Robinson.
Yeah, it's pretty much gone, man.
I'd say for him specifically.
Yeah.
Let's toss it out.
Yeah.
And
like, Akers still looks bad, but
Akers,
Robinson looks fantastic. So
Robinson looks fantastic, explosive. I mean, if I'm mistaken,
nothing ever happened. Yeah.
Like, and somebody correct me on the stat if I'm wrong, but I believe Robinson like leads all running backs like in explosive plays, like 10 yards of 10 plus yards or more. Like that's ridiculous.
I could see it.
Like that's ridiculous, right? So it's like if he's capable of doing that, and on top of that, and on top of all of those things, like he's still like the better pass protector, still at least capable in the rush in the receiving game as well. It's like now we've got everything we need for at least he checks all the boxes like for a bell cow back. I mean, all early downs, short yardage, passing game, pass
One of the only
protector.
ones in the league.
Right.
Like, it's one of like 6 in the
On
league.
a good offense. Like, this isn't the Jacksonville Jaguars of like 2021 or anything. This is a good offense.
And so there's no point really, just for fun, the fact that we drafted him at like 160 3 weeks ago, but like there's no way to know that he was going to just be fine coming off an Achilles. But I am going to ruffle some feathers here. This is a tough crossroads for me. This James Robinson and Travis Etienne, because I'm very much don't like to buy into hype on dynasty players. But I also know that once you see something, you need to act on it quicker, or it's going to be too late. And then you have to pay to play. You have to basically pay up for the player that you wanted because you waited to actually see it. So the feather ruffling commences in that, do you prefer James Robinson or Travis Etienne in Dynasty? What does Etienne do? What does Etienne do better? And there's like a 30 pick gap, right? And it makes sense because Ettiene was a first round pick. But this coaching staff didn't pick Ettiene in the first round. I liked Ettiene coming out, but I thought he'd be like a mid-second round player.
Yeah.
How many teams were willing to take him in the first? And then that coaching staff that drafted him in the first pretty much put him in a gadget role and said, oh, yeah, we drafted him to be Tavon Austin. Okay, well, your tenure was done way before you started kicking people and going to your the bar situation because you thought you were going to use a first round pick on a gadget, Isaiah McKenzie or something. So the writing was on the wall there. So it doesn't mean that Etienne's a bad player, but it's just that you see Doug Peterson and company using Travis Etienne in the way that we probably thought he would have been used if he was James Cook, right? James Cook in his rookie year, if Etienne was drafted where James Cook was drafted, which is about where I think he should have been drafted, we would have looked at them in the same light in that, oh, this is pretty promising. There's some opportunity here. But since Etienne went in the first round, we had to look at it more like, oh, he's going to be a bell cow. And maybe he would have if he didn't also have a season-ending injury, and maybe his career takes off. Because he's a fine running back. I mean, like you alluded to earlier, he could be a 3-down running back, but like I said, there's only like 6 in the NFL. So it's not like anyone is guaranteed that role at any time. It's just that James Robinson demands that role. 2,000-yard rushing seasons, comes off an Achilles, looks fantastic. And now he's better in every facet, including receiving, which is just mind-blowing. And you can't rest on your priors and just assume that James Robinson is going to go away just because Etienne was drafted in the first round. And it hasn't been anything Etienne's really done wrong. It's just if you cannot demand opportunity over another guy, then like you said, leading the league in explosive, how do you get Etienne on the field if he cannot outproduce James Robinson in the one thing that he is supposed to be the best at, which is explosive plays? Not only is James Robinson leading the team in explosive plays, he's leading the league in explosive plays. So how does Travis Etienne say, hey guys, I'm really explosive too? Yeah, you are, but so's James Robinson, who's playing ahead of you. Sorry about it, right? So what do you really do there? I mean, I guess what's Travis Etienne's value? Is he a trade?
Yeah, I would honestly, because here's my thought. And no, I had to double check myself. I was like way too overzealous about like his explosive run rate. He's top 10 in.
I was gonna say, even if he's top 10
in runs of 10 plus yards or more, and he's tied for 4th in runs of 15 plus yards or more according to PFF. Nice. So I had to double check myself. So I was like, you know what? Let me double check myself before somebody in the YouTube comments like comes for me, which I understand. But I think the biggest thing though is if you look at the evolution of this passing game moving forward, because if we do think that Ettiene has some value in the passing game, because again, slasher, I mean, fast speed, what was he like 4.3 something, 4.4, like coming out of college. So it's he does have a route to creating explosives like through the passing game, like already through 3 weeks. He is the more efficient receiver between the two. I would say though, I forget the gentleman's name, Jetpack Galileo on Twitter. He had noticed, or he had pointed out the fact that Ettiene, his hands, like how he actually catches the ball, the mechanics for him actually catching the ball is problematic. And that's why you see him not necessarily like alligator clapping at the ball whenever he goes to try and take in a pass. But there are some of those things where he's not as polished of a receiver. But let's just say that he works on that. He becomes more nuanced as a receiver. We see those things start to improve. And that's where the soft hands, along with the athleticism and speed that we know that he has, that allows him to be a more efficient pass catcher. I think right now, 1.6 like yards per route run, which is almost 3 times that of James Robinson, like through 3 weeks. And let's think about what this passing game is going to look like, let's say in 2023 and beyond. Marvin Jones, not going to be there. Are we really going to assume that some combination of Jamal Agnew, I mean, even like Zay Jones, like for his like resurgence now on his third team, if I'm remembering correctly, let's say he just still is relegated as, let's say, a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 2B. I mean, even some of the other pass catchers that are still there. I mean, Christian Kirk, again, glorified slot receiver. So it's like they need that pass catching help. They need that help like through the air in order to continue to boost like Trevor Lawrence like career as it moves along. It'd be good if they can get in on a prototypical like X receiver, but that's neither here nor there. But again, if there is a route to Ettiene kind of salvaging some of his value, it would be if he continues to come along as a rusher, which I think he can, pass blocker, which he's shown the willingness to learn more and like develop his craft like that way as well. We saw that just this past weekend. And then of course, like what he can do as a receiver. So I think if all those things continue to progress as we've seen so far this year, then yes, like will he come back to the first rounder ish like type value that we saw for him in his rookie season? Probably not, because James Robinson will always be a part of the equation. But can he salvage some of that value? And is he worth trading for now that his value has been somewhat depressed because James Robinson has become such a large factor? He is like the talk of the town, quite literally. Yeah, I think he's definitely worth acquiring if you can, like from a dynasty manager that is somewhat down on the fact that he's taken a back seat at this point, which I think rightfully so.
But one problem that's going to happen with trying to acquire Travis Etienne, because that's kind of where my mind always goes when we're really down on a player. I'm like, well, I'll probably just trade for him then. But the problem with Travis Etienne is that his value is not going to crater at any time because James Robinson's going to be a restricted free agent next year. And I don't want to pay extra for that when James Robinson's probably, even if he has, he's probably going to get another 1,000-yard season this year. So even if he has all these 1,000-yard seasons, he's still going to be a restricted free agent. And unfortunately, that sticks with you. So when contract negotiations come up, he'll probably be cheap for the Jaguars to keep. The Jaguars are clearly in favor of James Robinson over Travis Etienne. So they're probably not going to they're probably going to pay James Robinson. And remember, restricted free agent, he only has to get matched. So Jaguars don't even have to deal with negotiations if they don't want to. They just have to match the highest bidder. So I wouldn't be surprised to see another contract like 2 years, $8 million, something like that for James Robinson. It seems like running backs are always either like 6 or 10. So let's just say 2 years, 10 or something like that for James Robinson. Definitely in the cards. And then Etienne's whole rookie contract, because he'll have 5 years, is just going to be down the drain. Well, at least his value is going to have a huge correction. So if you try to trade for him now with the prospect of James Robinson being gone next year and James Robinson isn't gone next year, then you've got tough sledding ahead of you because you probably paid a little bit extra than you needed to. And then on the flip side, even if you rank James Robinson ahead of Travis Etienne right now and then they part ways next year, James Robinson still, even though he might not get paid that much, is going to has earned himself a role on a new team. So even though I usually don't like to invest in running backs entering free agency, James Robinson's going to be a young running back, not too terribly many touches, and he will probably get the bulk of the 60% somewhere. So he'll go from 60% snap share in Jacksonville to probably keeping 60% somewhere else. So while you invest in James Robinson right now, your future is probably relatively safe as a running back's future can be. Etienne's, I mean, you've got a wide range of outcomes. James Robinson leaves, then yeah, I mean, maybe if you're the Jaguars, you let him leave because you say, look, Etienne's good enough. Maybe he's not better than James Robinson, but he's good enough. But Etienne's 5th-year option is going to be more expensive than Yeah, I don't know. That's dicey. That's a tough situation. I think I'd rather invest in James Robinson right now than the roller coaster that might end up being ETN.
It could be. I mean, just thinking off the top of my head, the number of running back situations like now in the beginning of, well, end of week 3, beginning of week 4 in 2022. Just thinking about like what situations might be even viable for him at this point. I'm thinking like Arizona could possibly work out for them since they're on the last year of James Conner's deal, but it's like, are they going to have the cash in order to even afford him? Like you're talking 2 years, 8 million. They probably
Mhm.
not. They might not even have the cash to do that. I mean, they're already strapped for cash at the beginning of this season, so that might be a
Well,
bit too
so
dicey for them.
James Conner was 2 years, 6 million, and I feel like I'd probably rather James Robinson
Me
at
too.
this point in his career than James Conner. Even though I like James Conner when he headed to Arizona, he had that injury-riddled season right before it. So, if James Robinson has this monster season this year, might be his best year yet, the way that he started.
Sure.
If he has that monster season, then it's a little bit of a different narrative, and then you could see 2 million being tacked on. So yeah, I'll
Yeah,
stick with my guess at 8.
I think that's fair. I'm just trying to think of like ways that a guy like Travis Etienne could wind up recouping value because even if, or at least being like a solid value, because I think he can grow into the role or like grow into like salvaging some of his value,
Right.
but it almost would have to be like the 1-2 punch that Cleveland has right now, like with Kareem Hunt and Nick
It
Chubb.
would have to be, but they pass way too much.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say is that like right now, pass over expectation for the Jaguars got them at the very least like league average. And like the Browns have been like bottom 5 for the past couple of seasons, like under Kevin Stefanski. So unless there's this massive shift in their passing philosophy with Doug Peterson being there, I don't see that being the case. It just becomes I would say that for dynasty managers right now, trying to keep Travis Etienne might be a tougher sell because they're probably thinking through the same thing. Like, well, he's not going to get more passing work. I mean, unless, even if Marvin Jones leaves, he might get a few more targets and there's not going to be a massive shift in the passing game. So, man, I kind of want to get out from Travis Etienne. So you could get him for a decent price if you follow that logic.
Yeah,
And then,
depends on your league. Yeah, that's a
yeah,
good point. So, and another thing I wanted to mention before we move on to them is that it's so unfortunate that the Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara comparison has gotten used so much that once we get to one
oh,
that's actually
yeah,
like pretty good, it's like, I can't even use it. But that would be what they needed because that's an offense that passed plenty, but both backs
we're
caught the
good in the
ball.
passing game. I mean, both
Yeah,
were.
that's what they would need.
I mean, Mark Ingram, I mean, we already knew Alvin Kamara was ridiculously efficient as a wide receiver, like coming out of college. I mean, ask any college prospector from the guys on the data analytics side, like JJ Zacharyson, Anthony Amico, like those guys that look at mostly like the data portion, but even just the actual, let's say, like I watch like tape and I know these guys like Matt Waldman, Ray Garvin, like insert name here, and they could have all told you that Alvin Kamara was as smooth of a route runner and receiver as they come. And then Mark Ingram just so happened to have one of his most efficient years as a receiver himself, too. Not that he was bad or anything like that, but he just popped because they had this offense with Drew Brees and his, let's say, not great arm, but already on the decline. And it was just in that type of situation where it's just like all these things came together for a flash in the pan. I don't want to say never, but it'd be very hard to replicate that situation like ever again.
But that is what you
Where
would
you have a
need.
team, that's what you would need, which I guess. All right, so now I'm talking myself into this.
See, I don't that's it's
I'm
an
talking
insane
myself into it.
comparison, but I'm saying that's the only thing that would get both of these players to an increase in dynasty value.
Yeah,
And otherwise, one player is going up and the other one's going down. And I don't see James Robinson going down because
right.
his value cratered so much. There's nothing besides another injury that can happen for James Robinson to go down. So,
But then you've
just
got your wide receiver core is primarily featuring a glorified slot receiver, which in Michael Thomas's like rookie season, he was, I mean, slant boy. Again, you got a team that's passing at a high rate. I'm just saying, like this.
I'm
Hey,
just saying that's what
I'm
they
talking
would
myself
need.
into it.
I'm not saying that's what they would get, but if you are banking on both James Robinson and Travis Etienne increasing in value, you are going to need Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara season.
Yes, like you need a top, like a top fifth, like fifth
Yeah,
percentile
5%.
outcome
Yeah, yep.
in order for that to happen. And of course, also having, let's say, the I don't want to say the defense in order to give you like the additional risk, like the additional possession so that can continue to happen. But like not New England, New Orleans was running at like a breakneck pace. I mean, like their defense was also playing lights out as well. So just like all of these things had to happen in order for that to work out like in that season. And while Jacksonville, and I'm talking myself into it right now, man,
I do love me some Jacksonville right now.
they're a good team. They're like, it's just
both
and
sides.
I've heard this already said before, and it bears repeating. They are just objectively a good team. Like there's no caveats. There's no qualifications that are required in order to say that they're a good team. It's not like they're a good team because Indianapolis looks bad, despite the fact that they beat Patrick Mahomes just yesterday. They're not good because like the rest of the AFC South sucks, or like the rest of the AFC is kind of looking like not so great as of right now, especially after that slog of a Denver Fest that we just watched last night. Like Jacksonville is just objectively a good team, and that's great.
I'll eat crow on the Trayvon Walker pick. That looks like a really good pick right now.
Dude, I mean, freaking monster.
I mean, Aiden Hutchinson looks good too, but not as good as Trayvon Walker. So 3 games and I'll eat that. So let's jump to another running back that's coming back off injury. J.K. Dobbins, I believe, had 9 carries, 2 receptions, nothing major in his first week back. But the reason that it's important to discuss him this week, when we could have waited a couple more weeks to see how he would produce, is that first of all, Justice Hill finally, year 4 breakout is coming on, as well as Gus Edwards being eligible to return in week 5. So if you're going to do something about J.K. Dobbins, you're going to have to do it now. What do you think about J.K. Dobbins in his first week back?
Go and get you some J.K. Dobbins, like right now. So every week here at Footballguys, I write a column. It's called 3 Lessons I Learned from Each Week, where I kind of dive into each player, whether it's a good match or whether it's a good result, bad result, indifferent or whatever, but just something I find that just requires you to look under the hood a little bit in order to figure out like whether these things, like we see the box score scouts will tell you, this was good or bad just based off number of points, but I try and look at opportunity. And J.K. Dobbins last week, I think the box score scouts, they'll tell you, all right, Justice Hill, he had 3 times as many yards. I believe like J.K. Dobbins only had like 23 yards, and then J.K. Dobbins had like north of 60, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
They had the same amount of touches, like thereabouts. I mean, Hill had 6 rushes, Dobbins had 7, something along those lines. I thought
it was 9 and 2. I think there was 11 touches, but I'll confirm.
Yeah, but something along those lines. They more or less split the workload, something along those lines. But situational usage for running backs is one of the key critical things in order to evaluate like whether or not they're worthwhile, like from a fantasy aspect. I mean, raw touches are good. I mean, if you're outpacing like the rest of your backfield mates and there's this massive split like between, let's say, like Saquon Barkley and Matt Breida, okay, fine. I mean, that's fine. But if you're in like a true committee or something along those lines, like how you're being used like on the field, it changes things. It changes how we view them, and so it should. So let's say like if a running back is being used situationally, like in the red zone, short yardage like type situations, like a goal line back, like I don't know, James Conner, like from last year, that's probably useful for fantasy purposes, and that turned out to be the case last year. Also, what about like the 2-minute drill? I would think like from a or even from a game planning standpoint, I mean, teams practice or should practice like the 2-minute drill like every single week. Those are scripted plays that they come up with, specific packages like each week that coaches come up with. And if you are a part of that game plan, you're part of that situation, then you are integral to how the team wants to run their offense when everything is condensed, like the time frame is condensed. The plays need to come in quickly. They're trying to get into scoring position, all those things. So those 2 things, short yardage, 2-minute drill, important, right, for a running back to be on the field. J.K. Dobbins was on the field for 100% of those plays for the running backs, like yesterday. Like not Justice Hill. That was J.K. Dobbins, like last week.
I did see inside the 10 touch yesterday.
Yeah. So for his first week back, he was already 100% of the touches in the 2-minute drill, 100% of the red zone carries, like just last week. Now, of course, like Lamar Jackson, we knew going into this that Lamar Jackson was going to get his. I mean, the guy's playing lights out. He wants that bag. But
yeah,
if we're looking at just the running backs, so if you just like, go through to the box score and you just like, you sort by position, you just sort halfback, then it is J.K. Dobbins that is getting the situational carries that at least indicates that he's a part of the game plan and he's reasserting his role like as the dominant running back, like in that backfield. So that's what I want. That's what I wanted to see. Also was running routes too. Like for all the stuff that we discussed about, or not discussed, but all the hoopla over the past like week or so about he tore this ligament, he tore this, his hamstring,
3.
like this.
Yeah.
They had to reconstruct this. I mean, the dude's basically like Inspector Gadget, like in his lower half. Fine. He still ran 3 times as many routes as Justice Hill just this past week, who Justice Hill, like he also profiled as a pass catching back as well. So it's like if J.K. Dobbins is already in the first week running routes, running more routes than Justice Hill, being involved in situations that are critical to a, let's say, every down like type of back already, like in the first week, assuming he has no setbacks. Like we don't hear a report like tomorrow, J.K. Dobbins limited with a hamstring injury, J.K. Dobbins like limitedly, blah, 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 blah. You don't hear any of that. I mean, he's back. He's good. So I would go ahead if there are any concerns from box score scouts that are saying that, oh, well, they got similar amount of touches. It's a committee. Lamar Jackson can get his, all this other stuff. Any sort of that type of discussion, or if you can use that in your negotiations, I would go ahead and inquire him like right now because I think he's on his way back for sure.
Yep. Nothing else to add. Go grab J.K. Dobbins. That was 7 carries, 2 receptions. So you were right. 9.
Yep.
9 touches in week 1, and that was on 4 targets, looked like. So,
yeah.
Before we get to the last 2 players, let's talk about the Football Guys newsletter coming straight to your inbox from Joe Bryant. It's got contributions from Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom. They bring you all the news and notes from around the league that you need to win your fantasy leagues. You don't need all those apps. You don't need all those sleeper updates. All you need is one email from Joe Bryant, and he'll get you right on all the injury news as well. So it's going to be everything that you may have missed on Sunday. You know, we're watching Red Zone. You can't see everything. So I like to get the email to catch up on the things that were not on Red Zone. So go subscribe to the Football Guys newsletter, and then we will take some of the dynasty tidbits out of there and bring you this show every Monday. Next player we're going to talk about is Khalil Herbert, who has looked fantastic in every opportunity that he has gotten to take over for David Montgomery. Now, it looks like David Montgomery is going to be out with a short-term injury, something like 4 weeks probably. He's week to week for now, but I'm going to say it's going to end up being more than 1 or 2 weeks. So Khalil Herbert's getting that starting role, but he was already starting to eat into touches a little bit for one of the teams that is rushing the most, actually the team that's rushing the most in the league. So what do you think about Khalil Herbert? Is it time to try to buy in on him before this opportunity?
Yeah, and if anything, I'm pretty sure we had this conversation like throughout over the offseason. It's that it's those running backs that should be sitting at the back end of your roster that for this exact situation.
Dontrell Hilliard, we talked about in that same episode, has worked
exactly out. Because they were the types of running backs that like some folks they'll hold on to. I mean, it's probably a bad example, and I do kind of feel bad about like pointing them out at this point because I'm hoping they turn things around. But like Nyheim Hines and J.D. McKissick, and even I would say even Kenny Gainwell to a certain extent, but that's a slightly different, completely like a slightly different scenario, just given the way that the Eagles' offense is currently running right now with like Jalen Hurts going ham. But the pass catching backs, the guys that we think they have contingent value because they can be used in this specific way, but it only requires in some cases a specific scenario, or even though like we thought like without like Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce last week, Nyheim Hines was going to be like the play in DFS, like 4 targets. It was god awful, but it's those guys that people try and like glom onto because they're like, well, in PPR settings, which a lot of dynasty leagues are currently on right now, you want to have like the pass catching backs, the guys that you might feel comfortable about, like just flipping in as a flex, RB2 or whatever. But Khalil Herbert, Dontrell Hilliard, even like when he came out, at least for a time, we thought it was going to be like Chuba Hubbard. But it's like those types of backs that can profile as every down backs, like should the guy in front of them go down, those are the guys that you really want to have on your roster. Because Nyheim Hines, let's say even in the best of situations, just a complete run out, let's say, God forbid, knocking on wood, Jonathan Taylor goes down. Or even for J.D. McKissick, Brian Robinson doesn't come back, Antonio Gibson goes down. Again, knock on wood. What is their outcome? Like, are they getting this?
Somebody else is coming in.
Right. They're not jumping into the RB1 discussion. Not at all. Maybe they might jump into, let's say, the RB2-ish like type conversation because there might be some more targets, might be some more rushers or whatever. But they're not vaulting into the RB1 conversation. Derrick Henry goes down. Dontrell Hilliard is at least a part of the discussion, like for the RB1 mix, just because given the workload, the way that offense runs, yada, yada, yada. Same thing for Chicago, especially like almost immediately after David Montgomery went down and we knew immediately ruled out just go to social media right now. Like go to Twitter, scroll back to yesterday afternoon, and it was almost the immediate takeaway. I mean, Khalil Herbert. Hope you didn't drop Khalil Herbert. I told you to draft Khalil Herbert. I told you to have Khalil Herbert is this. Like, he's the number one waiver ad if he's on your league, not in my league. Like, all of those things, like people were saying immediately afterwards. And for all of the, I mean, terrible things that are going on in that offense right now, and I'm kind of scared for Justin Fields, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Those are the guys, but like those are the guys that you need to have like on the back end of your roster. The guys that in this particular situation, they're now a part of that RB1 conversation the moment that the guy in front of them goes down. And that's specifically for, I get it. They don't have the same like week to week contingent value that you might want. But when stuff like this happens, these are the guys that you want on your roster. These are the guys that you want sitting on the back end of your roster. Because even if you aren't contending, you can move them. If you know your roster isn't contending right now, let's say you had Trey Lance and Mac Jones on your roster, like for whatever reason, I don't know why, but still, if you had like somebody like that on your roster and you already know you're basically out, you can wind up flipping Khalil Herbert like right now for a pick, or especially over the next couple of weeks.
What I think is interesting to do in times like this, when you get a running back that's vaulted into a short-term opportunity that you think will continue. So like if David Montgomery misses 4 weeks, he's not coming back to more than 55% of the backfield, in my opinion. Khalil Herbert has just looked too good in his absence, and they run so much. So it's not even a knock against David Montgomery. It's just that it would behoove them to run David Montgomery about 50% and Khalil Herbert about 50%. So you go offer a trade, and those managers say, oh, I got him. I'm going to flip this guy. He's going to be a 4-week fill-in, and I'm going to make this profit, and then he's going to go back to being nothing. But in my head, he's going to play these 4 weeks. He's going to do fantastic. He's going to earn himself more opportunity. David Montgomery will be a free agent soon. Khalil Herbert, you got him as still a backup. So right now you're trading for him. Yes, you're going to be a little bit extra. But you got to see that he's about to have a 4-game starting opportunity, which he had starting opportunity last year and looked fantastic. This year, he's already looked good in limited opportunity. He already looked good when he took over for David Montgomery, and he's about to get 4 games of looking good on the league's top rushing. Well, I don't know if they're producing at the top rate, but they're rushing at the top rate.
And look at their schedule. They're playing against the Giants next week, Minnesota in week 5, the Commanders in week 6, and then the Patriots in week 7. At least 2 of those matchups. At least 2 of those matchups. And we'll talk about like maybe Minnesota in there, but at least 2 of those matchups. I mean, how would you not want a guy like him like on your roster? I mean, just yesterday alone, 7th in rushing success rate amongst all running backs.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we doing?
So you trade for him and you think that you're paying a little bit extra, but really you're getting, maybe a 50% running back for the rest of the year with opportunity to grow and be a starting running back for the team going forward. So it's not a bad time to try to trade for Khalil Herbert. That's the last running back we're going to get to today. I guess the last thing that we have to talk about is just what to do with DJ Moore in Dynasty. I mean, what a tough run. He did get he at least got a touchdown this season so far. Yeah. So his rate of let's hope he gets another one before the first quarter of the season's over, because he's usually on pace for 4 touchdowns a year. So it's so tough with a player like DJ Moore, because in the past with DJ Moore, let's say the past 3 years, every time it comes up that DJ Moore has had terrible quarterback play, hasn't been able to score touchdowns, yada, yada, you've been able to say, but he's so young. But it's creeping up on us fast on him not being so young, going to be 27. And it's just he hasn't hit his stride yet. It's probably not going to happen. So, but nobody's naive to that fact. I mean, Baker Mayfield probably their quarterback next year too, in all honesty. So unless they get a high enough pick, but it looks like they're going to win probably at least 3 or 4 games. So they probably don't get one of the top quarterbacks unless they trade up. So DJ Moore in quarterback purgatory for his entire prime is very unfortunate, but it might be time to try to trade him just based on name value alone and just how talented he is.
Maybe. It's only been 3 weeks. And if we're being quite honest, I mean, when did Baker Mayfield even enter into Carolina's, like onto the squad? What was that, like back end of July? Like when the trade went down? So it's like, the quarterback that he's currently with, like, while we assume to be better, at least like from a quality standpoint, like, okay, not as great, didn't have like high expectations, but at least he should have been better than Sam Darnold. But again, he came in late, and it's only been through it. It hasn't even been a month yet. Let's say I'd say my biggest concern though is their pace at this point. I mean, they are like running like towards the back end of the league in terms of like plays run like per game, which is something of a concern. And we're not even seeing like the same level of targets like to guys like Christian McCaffrey like we expected in the past. So it's like it's been almost a complete downshift, and almost like they're molding the offense, and even in terms of like pace, as the way that Baker was used to playing when he was in Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland, like back into the league in pace, like plays per game, like passing rates, like so on and so forth. Let's hope that with this, as he starts to get more of an understanding of the offense, more in rhythm, like with his receivers, like things start to pick up. So I'm not pressing the panic button yet, just taking a step back and looking at this entire timeline in context. Because looking at things like right now, still leads the team in like in routes run, still at least, just right behind like Robbie Anderson in terms of like total targets. I think Robbie Anderson is at like 16 or 17. Like DJ's got like 15 or 16. So like on the team itself, DJ Moore is still the wide receiver 1A, 1B, however you want to categorize it, which is what we expected to begin with. I think it's right now, it's just the entire offense like has shifted, which if you bring in a quarterback at the back end of the offseason, you would kind of
it tends to happen.
Yeah,
But
you'd expect to see
but
that
then you're
anyway.
getting a new head coach next year, hopefully, or you're stuck with Matt Rule, even worse. So it's like, and by the way, he's going to be 26, not 27. So let's
Okay.
just do this exercise before we get out of here. We've got DJ Moore ranked as wide receiver 16 in our consensus dynasty rankings. Would you rather have DJ Moore or Garrett Wilson?
Garrett Wilson.
You too. So we have Garrett Wilson at 20. Elijah Moore.
Yeah, Elijah Moore.
I'll take DJ Moore of Elijah Moore, but it's close. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean,
Sun God.
yes. St. Brown, we need to adjust that. Chris Olave.
I'd probably still want DJ Moore.
I would go DJ Moore. Let me try to find you another good one. This one wouldn't be good yet, but it's going to be good soon. Jameson Williams.
DJ Moore. For right now, I think.
Yeah.
The story's not written yet on Jameson Williams.
We don't know, but you would
know.
have to make that move soon. I bet you.
So,
you know what? I bet you if I had DJ Moore, I'd be going to the person who has Jameson Williams and just being like, can I get like a third on top of Jameson Williams? I'd be happy with that.
That's a good starting negotiation just to see how things work out. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I mean, he'll probably drop down from 16 just a little bit. We got these young guys looking like another good wide receiver class. We've already got Drake London passing him by 1 already. So Drake London's 15, DJ Moore 16. Garrett Wilson's still my wide receiver 1. He's leading. I think he's 3rd in the league in targets through the first 3 weeks, at least top 5.
Wouldn't surprise me.
And that's as the wide receiver 3. I mean, he's still wide receiver 3 in snaps. So who knows what it's going to look like when he jumps to a bigger role. All right, so that's going to do it for today. Thank you all for coming out. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, and we will catch y'all next week.
Peace.